Hello everybody, my name is Noah Miller. I'm going to be doing something a little bit different today. I'm going to be going over a band that I have been following for quite some time now, probably for the last 6 years or so, I want to say. And that is Coheed and Cambria, and they have just dropped their new album a couple weeks ago called Vaxis Act II, A Window of the Waking Mind. Now, this album follows the ongoing saga in Claudio Sanchez's The Amory Wars. This new pentalogy with Vaxis takes up after No World for Tomorrow. In 2018, they dropped In Heavenly Creatures, which was their return back to the form of the concept. So, a couple things with their last album. I know it's a bit weird to get into their last album before their newest album, but a lot of the things that I have problems with this new album, the last album too, and kind of carry on. Now, I absolutely love this band, but this sound that they're going on with these last two albums have been a lot more electronic influenced. Claudio, the frontman, has a side project called The Prizefighter Inferno, which he calls folktronica. So there's some elements of Prizefighter that end up kind of influencing the newer records from Coheed. Now, the singles for this new album, A Window of the Waking Mind, I wasn't too hip on when they first came out. When I first heard Shoulders, I was pretty discouraged because of the absurd auto-tune. Just the riff seemed a little by the numbers, a little bit bland for Coheed than I'm used to. There was also Rise Nyanasha, or Cut the Cord, which is pretty interesting, I thought. And then Liars Club, that was the next single. That one's pretty catchy and, you know, acceptable. And then there was Comatose, which I think they just kind of threw out as a gimme, because it was getting pretty close to the album. But the things that kind of turned me off to them were like some of the melodic lines, some of the grooves from Josh, the drummer, just didn't seem to be on the same level as previous albums. In previous albums, there was more of like a story, more unique kind of lines and things that were said in the songs. But I think now Claudio is kind of relying on cliches a lot now. And the one biggest thing that has really started turning me off to newer Coheed stuff is just their production. The way that they're producing their albums just seems way too heavy for the sound that they're kind of going after. Way too processed. It's way too synthetic. And the thing that kind of drew me to Coheed was sort of like their organic production. Like, if we go back to something like Second Stage, that was like their first album after Shaboodi. And that one had really crisp, like, clear production. It was very garage, but it was very professional garage. And then they started kind of cleaning it up, but it still had that kind of acoustic edge to it. Color Before the Sun is probably their most organic sounding album. It's their most fresh sounding record, in my opinion. I think one of the things that has kind of been the big change in their production has been these last two albums. Well, I know Unheavenly Creatures was, but I'm not sure if this one was, but they were self-produced. So it was just the band in the studio. I mean, I'm sure they had like some other suits or something walking around making sure that they're doing all right. And like they've said, they've always had kind of a hand in the production. But this was really the first one where they took over the reins of it and decided to kind of do it their way, which I'm not too big on the huge, giant arena rock style production that they're kind of going with, and then incorporating all these like different synth elements and stuff like that. I don't know. It just seemed a little bit too much for me to kind of get into. It kind of felt like they over-sweetened their sound. The songwriting on this album, to me, has more songs landing than Unheavenly Creatures did. The thing with Unheavenly Creatures was that I just felt the songwriting was very loose and not as thought out as previous albums, because in previous albums I can listen to them front to back. I don't really have to skip a track. So much cool stuff going on from song to song that I don't really feel the need to skip around. It's really only with Unheavenly Creatures that I kind of feel the need to do that. But this one, Vaxis Act II, has a lot more landing on it. I think that the songwriting is stronger with things like Disappearing Act. Like that was an example of a departure from their original sound that I thought was really good. It has a lot of like early 2000s like pop elements to it. Like I get sort of like a Britney Spears, almost like Owl City-esque kind of like pop vibe, but it's definitely Claude's songwriting still in there. Comatose, like I said, was pretty good. It's probably one of the stronger pop songs on the album. Window of the Waking Mind, the closer on this album, has a lot of interesting twists and turns and different sections that it goes into, different vibes that it pulls out. And they seem to, mesh pretty well, flow pretty well from one to the next. Love Murder 1 is pretty good. It's probably one of the weakest strong songs on this album. And in keeping with the Amory Wars saga, throughout this entire band's discography, there is a common thread of the Amory Wars. I actually have one of the comics here. This is a comic series that Claudio Sanchez and his wife Chandra Sanchez kind of write together, and it follows the albums in Coheed's discography. So Second Stage Turbine Blade is like the start of the story, and then it goes through No World for Tomorrow. Year the Black Rainbow is actually a prequel. The Afterman series, that takes place at the same time as the original Amory Wars, but in a different place. And then they have one non-conceptual album, which is Color Before the Sun. This last album and this new album, they start getting back into the story. So there's a big emphasis on story throughout Claude's career, but I just feel that with this entry, it's not as strong of an entrance into the actual story. In the last one, we were introduced to Creature, Sister Spider, a couple other characters that help them out, and how they got into this planetary prison that they're on. And it's a whole like sci-fi adventure narrative. We find out that Creature and Spider are going to have a child, and they're going to name him Vaxis. And then the rest of the story kind of revolves around Vaxis. I just felt that this album hit a lot of the same notes that the pre-Vaxis album did. It kind of just hits the same themes. It almost seems like it's taking place in the same time. At least as far as lyrics, because there's not really much of a change in the lyrics from album to album. In the storytelling, there's a lot of emphasis on choice, like a forsaken child having to make a decision that he doesn't want to, and like a parent's love for their child, and growing up, like coming of age stories and stuff like that. Which all of these are notes that they hit on with the last pentology, with the original Amory Wars saga. It really, to me, just kind of gives off vibes of like The Force Awakens versus the original trilogy. I don't know, that's just kind of the closest comparison that I can make. It's got the core of the storytelling aspects of the last story, of the last series, of the last saga, and then it just kind of gives it a new coat of paint, gives it some new characters, gives it a new place, and then he just kind of put it in the new story. I don't know, I just feel like the storytelling for this new saga isn't going to be as strong as the last one. Time to get to probably the cardinal sin, and one thing that I've been kind of alluding to throughout this entire review is just the production. The production, the production. I cannot stand it. Like I said, these last two albums have been self-produced by the band, where it's been mostly them kind of behind the reins, making the decisions on kind of how things sound. I just think that maybe someone else should have been in the room while they were making that album. Because every other time, it's just sounded great. And then this one time that they take the reins, it doesn't. Something's correlation, maybe causation. There's just less subtlety in tone across the album, with the guitar tone, with the vocals, just with the synths, with pretty much everything. There's just not as much subtlety, there's not as much nuance, there's not as much dynamics. I don't know, there's just not many, like, moments in the album like there is with Color Before the Sun, like there is with Afterman Ascension, like there is with Good Apollo. And it's also the thing of they're trying to go for this super heavy production, but trying to stay poppy at the same time. Because, like, they have this kind of juxtaposition in Beautiful Losers. That song, to me, is kind of the perfect encapsulation of, like, too heavy for a pop song. Because, like, that guitar tone is just, like... It's just, like, super heavy and super crunchy. It's just not the right sound for that song. At least I don't think. If that's what Claudia wanted, hey. And this combination of trying to be heavy and poppy maybe works out 2 songs out of 10. I don't know. It just doesn't hit that right with me. Another thing is that the drums are also way too produced, I feel like. They're, like, one of the things, I remember Josh talking about this in, like, an Instagram Live or something like that, and he said, don't use samples on my drum tracks. Like, don't mess with that. So it's just blatantly sampled at this point, and it's just so big arena rock. And the thing is that they're going on about how they love the production on this album. The band is, at least on their Twitter, way too bombastic. It's way too heavy. It just kind of goes against what they're going for, I feel. Another thing, I just absolutely hate this, like, T-Pain auto-tuner effect that Claude is putting on his vocals now, because he's never had to use it. In, like, the 20 years of him being a vocalist for the band, he's never had to use it. Even on their first album, when he's pitchy in some spots, or even on, like, No World for Tomorrow, like, specifically in Mother Superior, for, like, the second pre-chorus, I think, he hits this, like, really weird, like, flat note. You gotta leave that pitchiness, you gotta leave those mistakes, you gotta leave all that stuff on there. Like, when I listened to Disappearing Act for the first time, I couldn't help but laugh. I literally could not help but laugh because that sound is just so not what they do. It's really cool that they did it, and I really like the song. It's one of my favorite songs on the album. But there's like a part where he says it's okay, and it's got like this like super strict like auto-tune effect on there, and it just completely ruins it. It makes me not be able to take the whole thing seriously. They're having fun with it, and I'm really glad that they're having fun with it. But if you're gonna have an album released under the same band that released something as serious as Good Apollo, releasing something like this, I feel, kind of undermines that. Obviously you don't have to be serious all the time, but Claude's got different stuff. He's got Prizefighter Inferno, like, he's got his own, like, personal projects that he can do, that he can release. I'm sure he could get anyone he wanted to do songs with him. It's just that with some of this, I just felt like there wasn't as much he was trying to say. The thing with the older albums is that it really feels like he's trying to get something out. It really feels like he has something to say. It really feels like he doesn't have time to mess around to explain himself, to get across things in the most direct way possible. He's trying to he tries to be a little esoteric and tries to kind of hide things, but in this, I feel like he's really just kind of laying all of his cards out on the table. He doesn't have as much that he personally needs to say. I mean, even with stuff like Color Before the Sun, that one was all about his first son, Atlas, coming into this world, and for him wanting to kind of capture that essence as of what being a father is like to him and what he thinks that he's gonna be. Like, he's got all these thoughts running around in his head around 2015, and he's able to pour them into this album. And even though a lot of people really didn't like it, I absolutely love this album because it's really just kind of, he poured his heart into this, and he really had something to say, and he is really able to get that across. I don't know, I just feel like that magic isn't there for these last two albums. And part of it, I feel like, is because he doesn't have as much to say as he used to. I mean, he made this whole concept to kind of bury his life story in, and be able to, you know, express it without fear of kind of being retaliated against, you know? I just feel that kind of with these last two albums, the magic has, not the magic has like gone. He kind of doesn't have as much to say, and he is sort of just trying to get this story out because he said that he would have 5 parts for this new pentology, and he's got to write all this stuff, and he's got to, you know, create all these characters and stuff. I don't really know what I'm rambling about at this point. I just really love this band, and I really hate to see it just kind of, you know, take this sort of turn. I know I'm going to always have the original albums. That's what people always say. If you don't like the new album, go listen to the original. It's also kind of cool to be able to appreciate the new stuff. And I do appreciate parts of the new stuff. Dude knows how to write a song. I just don't think that all of them on this new album are as poignant and substantive as the rest of his material leading up to this point. So, with that, I will give this album a rating of a light to decent 5, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.